The old man's medals clinked softly against his threadbare jacket as he collapsed, the sound almost lost in the steady drumbeat of rain and rushing feet. Nobody stopped. Umbrellas bobbed past like black clouds, their owners' eyes fixed firmly on glowing phone screens or the wet pavement ahead. Through the haze of city lights and falling rain, a motorcycle's engine idled at the red light, its rider's face hidden behind a rain-spotted visor. In that moment, the difference between wearing medals and deserving them hung in the air like the mist itself. The intersection at 7th and Broadway pulsed with its usual evening rhythm, the impatient honking of yellow cabs, the hiss of bus brakes, the endless stream of bodies moving between towers of steel and glass. The old veteran had been standing there for hours, one hand pressed against a lamppost, too proud to ask for help, despite the tremors that ran through his weathered frame. A taxi driver watched from his cab, fingers hovering over his phone's emergency dial, but hesitation kept him frozen behind the wheel. The light turned green, but the motorcycle didn't move. Its rider's head turned slowly, visor reflecting the kaleidoscope of city lights as he observed the scene unfolding before him. The old man's medals, earned in battles fought decades ago, caught the glow of passing headlights as he lay there, abandoned by the very society he had once sworn to protect. That's when Keanu Reeves decided that some battles don't end with war, and some heroes need saving themselves. Time seemed to crystallize in the rain-soaked evening air. The veteran's collapse had created a small eddy in the rushing stream of pedestrians, people swerving around his crumpled form like water around a stone, their momentary glances a mixture of concern and calculated indifference. His military jacket, worn thin by years but still meticulously maintained, was dark with rain. The medals that had once shone with pride now caught the neon lights of the city like tears. In his pocket, a carefully folded photograph showed a younger man in dress uniform, standing proud beside a helicopter in a distant desert. That same man had returned home to find his country had moved on without him, leaving him to navigate a battlefield of indifference far more crushing than any war zone. Today, like every day for the past month, he'd stood at this corner, watching the endless parade of comfortable lives rush past, too proud to beg, too broken to start over. The taxi driver, Miguel Ramirez, gripped his steering wheel tighter, years of New York street wisdom warring with the voice of his grandmother, who had always told him that karma remembers both action and inaction. His phone screen still glowed with the half-dialed 911 call. Through his windshield, he watched as businessmen in $1,000 suits performed an intricate dance of avoidance, their shoes worth more than his weekly earnings, stepping carefully around the fallen veteran. A group of tourists paused briefly, their instinct to help quickly overwhelmed by the city's unwritten rule of non-involvement. One woman even raised her phone, perhaps to call for help, but the momentum of urban apathy swept her along with the crowd. The rain continued its relentless descent, each drop carrying the weight of collective shame, while traffic lights painted the scene in alternating hues of red and green, like nature itself couldn't decide whether to stop or go. The motorcycle's engine continued its low rumble, a counterpoint to the symphony of urban indifference. Behind his rain-streaked visor, Keanu Reeves watched the scene unfold with growing resolution. He had played heroes on screen countless times, Neo fighting against the system, John Wick pursuing justice, even Ted Theodore Logan spreading joy through time. But here, in this moment, was something more real than any script could capture. He noticed how the veteran's fingers still clutched at his jacket pocket, protecting that folded photograph even in unconsciousness. The man's face, weathered by time and hardship, bore a dignity that no amount of poverty could erase. Through the visor of his helmet, Keanu could see what others were choosing to ignore, not just a man in need, but a mirror reflecting society's selective compassion. The light had cycled from red to green 3 times now, but sometimes, he knew, the right moment demands that you stop completely, regardless of what color the world is telling you to follow. The first movement came not from the crowd, but from above. The rain, which had been a steady drizzle, suddenly intensified, sending people scurrying for better cover and forcing them to acknowledge the obstacle in their path. A young executive, irritated at having to step into a puddle to avoid the fallen veteran, made a sound of disgust that cut through the white noise of the city. "Someone should really call the cops to clear this up," he said loudly to no one in particular, his voice carrying the entitled certainty of someone who had never known real struggle. Miguel, the taxi driver, felt his grandmother's voice grow louder in his head. From his rearview mirror, he could see the veteran's chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. The man's military jacket had fallen open, revealing a Marine Corps shirt underneath, its fabric as faded as the American dream it represented. The medals, combat decorations, Miguel realized, reflected the red traffic light like small flames against the darkness. His own father had worn similar medals, earned in a different war but carrying the same weight of sacrifice and service. The executive wasn't finished. "This is exactly what's wrong with this city," he continued, now addressing the growing crowd of rain-trapped onlookers. "We pay ridiculous taxes and still have to deal with this on our way home." Each word landed like a physical blow, making several people shift uncomfortably, though none spoke up in defense of the fallen man. The motorcycle's engine cut off abruptly, its sudden silence drawing eyes toward the rider. Keanu Reeves dismounted with fluid grace, his movements unhurried but purposeful. Water streamed off his black riding gear as he removed his helmet, and a ripple of recognition passed through the crowd. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, their cameras focusing not on the veteran, but on the unexpected celebrity in their midst. The executive, emboldened by his previous monologue and oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, raised his voice again. Finally, someone with actual influence. "This is what I'm talking about. We need to get the proper authorities to handle these people." He gestured expansively, his umbrella sending a spray of water toward the unconscious veteran. The cameras captured what happened next in perfect clarity. Keanu set his helmet down on the motorcycle's seat with deliberate care, his face carrying the same intensity that had marked his most memorable roles. But this wasn't John Wick's controlled anger or Neo's determined resolve. This was something entirely real, a genuine human response to witnessing the decay of compassion in the heart of one of the world's greatest cities. Thunder rolled overhead as Keanu moved toward the fallen veteran, each step measured and intentional. The crowd parted automatically, smartphones tracking his movement like a collection of electronic fireflies in the growing darkness. Miguel watched through his windshield as the actor knelt beside the old soldier, completely indifferent to the rain soaking through his clothes or the puddle seeping into his jeans. The executive, suddenly aware that the script wasn't following his preferred narrative, cleared his throat. "I mean, obviously we should call professionals. It's a liability issue, really. You can't just—" His words trailed off as Keanu turned to face him, rain running down his face like tears. The veteran stirred slightly, his weathered hand still protecting the photograph in his pocket. Without hesitation, Keanu shrugged off his riding jacket and placed it gently over the old soldier's chest. The executive's words about liability hung in the air, colliding with this simple act of human dignity. Phones continued recording as the actor checked the veteran's pulse with the focus of someone who understood that real heroism isn't about grand gestures, but about doing what's right when everyone else is finding excuses not to. Miguel's fingers finally found their courage, completing the 911 dial he should have made minutes ago. As he spoke with dispatch, he watched Keanu Reeves, movie star, action hero, cultural icon, sit down completely on the wet pavement beside the fallen veteran, using his own body to shield the old soldier from the rain. The contrast between the actor's simple humanity and the crowd's prior indifference created a tableau that no Hollywood script could have conceived. The photograph slipped from the veteran's pocket as Keanu helped him into a more comfortable position, landing in a puddle that reflected the city lights like a mirror of memories. The actor retrieved it quickly, protecting the worn image from the rain with his body. Through the gathering crowd, now drawn as much by the unfolding drama as the celebrity presence, Miguel watched Keanu study the photograph with an intensity that seemed to still the very rain around him. The image showed the veteran in his prime, standing proud beside a medical evacuation helicopter in Afghanistan, combat medals gleaming on his chest. The same medals that now lay rain-soaked against his threadbare jacket. The executive, who had been momentarily silenced by Keanu's presence, found his voice again. "Look, we all respect military service, but do we?" Keanu's voice cut through the rain and traffic noise with quiet force. He stood slowly, still holding the photograph, his usual gentle demeanor hardened by something deeper than anger. "Do we respect it enough to notice when one of our heroes needs help, or do we only respect it in movies and parades?" The veteran stirred, his eyes flickering open to find himself surrounded by a forest of legs and umbrellas, with a familiar face from countless movies kneeling beside him. His attempt to sit up was met with Keanu's gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. "Easy, sir. Help is coming. Marine Corps, right? Medevac pilot?" "Lieutenant Colonel James Martinez," the veteran managed, his voice carrying the same inherent dignity that had kept him from begging all these months. "Though these days, most people just don't see me at all." The words hung in the air, an indictment of every averted gaze and hurried step that had passed him by. Keanu helped the colonel sit up, keeping his riding jacket wrapped around the older man's shoulders. The executive, increasingly aware of the phones recording his every move, attempted to salvage his position. "I was just saying we should get professional help." "Professional help?" Keanu's voice remained quiet, but it carried to every phone recording the scene. "Like the kind of professional help Colonel Martinez provided? How many lives did you save, sir?" He directed this last question to the veteran, who looked down at his hands that had once guided rescue helicopters through combat zones. 217, Martinez answered, his voice finding strength in the memory. "But the last one I couldn't." His words faltered, the weight of that final failed rescue hanging in the rain-soaked air. The crowd had grown larger now, with people stopping despite the rain, drawn by both the celebrity presence and the palpable sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented in their carefully ordered urban lives. Miguel had stepped out of his taxi, his grandmother's voice in his head, now a chorus of approval. 217 lives, Keanu repeated, his voice carrying across the intersection. He turned to face the crowd, still holding the photograph. 217 families who got their loved ones back because this man flew into combat zones to save them, and we can't spare a moment to help him when he's down. The executive shifted uncomfortably, his expensive shoes soaked through. "I didn't know." "None of us knew," Keanu interrupted, but gently now. "Because we chose not to know. We chose not to see." He helped Colonel Martinez to his feet, supporting him with the same care the veteran had once shown to wounded soldiers. But that's not who we have to be. That's not who we are when we're at our best. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the rain, but it was already too late to maintain the comfortable fiction of urban anonymity. People were stepping forward now, offering umbrellas, jackets, words of thanks. Miguel approached with his phone, showing the screen to Keanu and the colonel. He had not just called 911, but had found Colonel Martinez's service record online. The medals on his chest weren't just decorations. They told a story of valor that had somehow become invisible in the rush of city life. The paramedics would arrive to find not a lonely figure on wet pavement, but a circle of protection, led by a movie star who had reminded everyone present that real heroism isn't about the roles we play, but the choices we make when the cameras aren't supposed to be rolling. The story of what happened at that rain-soaked intersection spread through social media like lightning through a storm cloud. Videos captured the moment from dozens of angles: the fallen veteran, the indifferent crowd, the unexpected intervention of Keanu Reeves. But what made the clips go viral wasn't just the celebrity presence. It was the raw humanity that no amount of Hollywood production could replicate. Colonel Martinez received medical attention for dehydration and exhaustion, but the real healing began in the aftermath of that evening. Miguel, the taxi driver, had started a social media campaign before the ambulance even arrived, sharing the colonel's story and service record. The executive, in an unexpected turn, was among the first to contribute. His earlier comments transformed into a public reminder of how easy it is to lose sight of our shared humanity. Within days, the ripple effect transformed into a wave. Veterans organizations across the city mobilized, connecting Colonel Martinez with housing assistance and support services he had never known how to access. His story opened a wider conversation about how society treats its heroes once the uniforms come off and the parades end. Keanu Reeves, true to his reputation, deflected attention back to the larger issue. In a brief statement that only amplified the story's impact, he said simply, "The real story isn't about me. It's about who we choose to be when we think no one important is watching." The video of that statement, combined with the intersection footage, sparked a movement across social media platforms, with people sharing stories of veterans in their own communities. 1 month after the incident, Colonel Martinez stood at the same intersection, but everything had changed. He wasn't alone now. He was speaking to a group of young cadets about his experience, both in war and on the streets. The medals on his chest shone in the sunlight, no longer hidden by shame or invisibility. The intersection had become a symbolic place, marked by a small plaque that read, "On this corner, we remembered who we are." Miguel's taxi now bore a special veteran support sticker, and he had become a regular volunteer at the local VA hospital. Even the executive had found a way to transform his moment of public shame into positive action, starting a corporate program to hire and support veterans. The rain-soaked evening when Keanu Reeves stopped his motorcycle had done more than save one man. It had reminded an entire city, and eventually a nation, that true honor isn't found in how we treat the visible heroes, but in how we treat those whose heroism has become invisible to all but themselves.